welcome back once again to our Red Hot Talk. And Rod Lawton and myself, Jimmy Cheng.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. And we're going to give you a few minutes until people are starting to join our conversation. But I think what we are going to do over the course of next few weeks, we are going to talk camera brands. Hopefully that you guys will be quite fun with what we're going to talk about. Hopefully it's not going to be too heated or too controversial. And Stan, yes, hello, Stan. And you know what? Rod just showcased his new acquisition from you.
Stan, do you recognize this camera?
What
you
a
should.
beauty.
You should.
What a beauty. And then we got Andrew Banner here, who's Seraphine. Yeah, that's good. All the regulars are here. So yeah, what we're going to do is the next few weeks, we're going to spend some time talk about individual camera brand that is existing still. We're not talking about past brands, but we're going to talk about brands that are still around, and each and every one of them we'll talk about the past, present, and hopefully future. You know, we're going to share our experiences between Rod and I, and maybe yourself as well. If you have any experience using any of the brands that we are going to talk about, please do feel free to share your opinions and maybe even your wishes about what you would like to see them happening or doing in the future. This week we are going to kickstart this series of chats by talking about Fujifilm. I have limited exposure to Fujifilm. I have used some cameras and tried the X-T5 and so forth. Rod has actually got some Fujifilm cameras, so he can talk about them, and we can talk a little bit about their past, present, you know, what they're doing right now, and maybe look into the future and see what else they may be doing. And also, if you guys have any experience at all about Fujifilm, if you use any of the gear, whether it's going to be APS-C or their medium format cameras, please do share your opinions and also experience with our listeners and also our live audience right here, so we can learn a little bit about the system as well. So shall we kickstart it? I think we should. So Rod, Fujifilm has been around. And way back in when they started with the, you know, the film, we'll talk about negatives and all the analog stuff. And I mean, they have done some cameras before, you know, way back in the 60s and 70s. They have the Fujinon cameras, right? Fujica, yes, that's right. They also have medium format cameras, which were quite popular. I mean, I actually have one somewhere, and I have used it. Very, very good cameras. You know, the kind of things kind of die down for a bit before they kind of re-enter the camera industry, right?
Yeah, I think Fujifilm's renowned for its X-series cameras now, but before that, it didn't make a lot of compact cameras like so many other makers do, but it also made the gosh, I've got them in the cupboard. Why can't I remember it? DSLRs.
The S Pro.
The Finepix S3 Pro, which I have, and they later made an S5 Pro, which I didn't have, but was rather better. And that was before they got into mirrorless. So they've been kind of on the outskirts of cameras for a while. And I think the S3 Pro and the S5 Pro were fairly significant in their time. Yeah. So, you know, it's not like Fujifilm was a newcomer, but it's the X mount that's really got it back in the mainstream, I think.
Yeah, because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the DSLR that Fuji launched back then, it was more or less sharing or utilized the Nikon body, right?
It was a Nikon. it was a Nikon, but Fujifilm was for a very long time always tried to do something different with sensor design, and the S3 Pro had a kind of double-barreled SR sensor, so it had kind of paired photo sites, one for sensitivity, one for resolution, I guess. I'm trying to think through if that's correct. But basically, this gave you fewer effective megapixels, but massively increased dynamic range. And to this day, I don't think there's another camera that has higher dynamic range than the S3 Pro and the S5 Pro. But on the downside, the resolution, depending on whether you spoke to Fujifilm or one of its critics, was either 6 megapixels or 12. Which even then was marginal. But of course today 6 megapixels doesn't really work.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's done all sorts of things. It's had EXR sensors. I forget the exact principle behind the EXR sensors. They were designed for increased dynamic range too, and now it's got X-trans, which isn't necessarily designed for increased dynamic range, but it uses a different color filter layout,
yeah.
so that you don't
That's
need
right.
an anti-aliasing filter, you don't get moire, and there are meant to be other advantages too. So Fujifilm is always trying to do something different with its sensor design. So that's
That
quite interesting.
that certainly is very interesting, but we're going to come back to the sensor design maybe a little bit later on. But what I always find that what Fujifilm has done well over the years is how they utilize the experience in the whole color science side of it, because they renown, their films are popular, and I used Fuji negative and positives back in the analog days, and my favorite Fujifilm next were the Reala 100, and that's one of my favorite negatives that I've ever used. It's really sharp, the grains are very fine, so you do get some really punchy photos out of it. Then for the professional side, I mean, I got a 400H I really like the tone of it. Obviously, you got the other positives that are the usual ones that everybody loves, and so it's quite a whole bunch of things I really like about their science, and they somehow managed to transfer those colors into their digital space now. I mean, they have this film simulation on their latest X series cameras, and proven to be a hit, amongst all the new users, whether you have born in my era or you're the newcomer just learning about photography in the last 15 or so years. I think they really done well in terms of transferring that kind of analog feel to the digital age.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not. I don't think the film simulations are necessarily very accurate renditions of the actual film itself, but they like it, and it gives you some variety in your styles, and also because the newer cameras can also add grain in JPEGs, you do get a kind of quite authentic film style. But I think Fujifilm has done something very clever with the new XT50, in that it's put a dedicated film simulation dial on the top plate. So this probably won't interest people who shoot RAW particularly, but if you shoot JPEGs, or you just want to get an indication on the camera of what your RAW files are going to look like, is a good way to do it, because Lightroom and Capture One, they both can match these film simulation profiles in RAW. So if you shoot RAW, what I'm trying to say is, if you shoot RAW, both these programs can apply a profile which recreates the film simulation of the cameras. So you can shoot JPEG and get it, but you can shoot RAW and get it as well. So that's quite nice.
That certainly is very, very good. I think that X Pro 3 had that similar sort of windows at the back, right? If you choose a film simulation, you kind of display what film you're using. I think it may sound a bit gimmicky, but I kind of like that. It's almost like back in the old days when you tear off the packaging from the film and just stuff that the top at the back.
Yeah.
I really miss that actually.
I thought it's quite a nice idea. I mean, it's a little silly, and
it's
you're,
little things,
you're pretending, but it's nice. It's nice, and if it stops you looking at every picture the minute you've taken it, it keeps your eye on the photography instead. That's kind of a good thing.
I must admit, there are good gimmicks and there are bad gimmicks, and I think that's a very good gimmick.
It's a good gimmick.
It really hits the note, and I think that's what one main strength of how Fujifilm can play around with consumers' liking. They know exactly what the customer likes, and they play around with that, and it works. Not just that they have digital cameras, but you look at the Instax cameras. The mini Evo, which is exactly the same thing. It had the retro styling, the black and silver. The styling of it is almost like a retro camera. But instead, it's just an Instax camera. But somehow they play around the styling to make it look very appealing to people who may already have the X series cameras, and just to get another Instax camera to go side by side. So they've done really well on that one.
Yeah, I think Fujifilm has always managed to judge the fashion and the trend of the moment, and find designs and looks that appeal to people, not necessarily on the technical level, but just they're just appealing.
Yep.
So I think Fujifilm's been pretty good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just reading some of the comments, and people already share something that they have in the past. I mean, I can see Andrew, you got the S2 Pro. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had the S2 Pro.
You know, I was tempted to get the S Pro at some point. I can't remember S2 or S3 that I really wanted to get at the time, and because I find it quite interesting to have Fujifilm cameras and the digital. I know it's a Nikon body, but it's something appealing about Fujifilm as a brand. I was interested more to the colors and the technology of the sensor itself.
It's good in that it's quite a hefty camera and it handles quite nicely. I think we've all forgotten just how small those APS-C DSLR viewfinders were. So it's not one of the best viewfinders. But the real problem I have with that camera is that it doesn't take lithium-ion batteries. It takes 4 AAs. And even if you get good modern AAs that hold their charge well, you're constantly running out of power. You need basically like a backpack full of batteries if you go anywhere. So that's quite annoying. But I found the image quality it's not quite the resolution of a proper 12 megapixel sensor, but the dynamic range was just out of this world.
Right.
It worked very well in Lightroom. Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw could always get back huge amount of highlight detail.
That's interesting. So, I'll see if I can find a very cheap old one, and I can just play around with it, just see what it feels like.
There is a modern equivalent. People don't talk about the Fujifilm dynamic range expansion very much, but as far as I can tell, what it does is you can set the dynamic range to 200% or 400%, so you can gain an extra stop or 2 stops. And as far as I can see, it's mostly at the highlight end, which is where I think most people run out of dynamic range. So I think essentially it reduces the exposure so that you keep the highlights, but then boosts the tone curve so that you still get a normal looking exposure. But with my X-T5, I came back from my last trip with a bunch of shots, including some that were quite badly overexposed. I was pulling back 3 stops of highlight detail, which just doesn't happen. Most cameras is 1. Is 1. I've got a Canon where it's got an extended dynamic range mode that's 200%. So I can get back about 2 stops, but 3 out of this world. So, Fujifilm always approaches things slightly differently, often successfully. Not always, but often.
Right. I just read Eric's comment. It's quite funny. Not sure who said that the Fuji is the new Nintendo. Perhaps.
Long time since I used the Nintendo.
And Stan said that I'm just going to bring up his comment. It's probably easier. I'm just going to bring it up here. X-Tran helped to eliminate moire patterns once the low-pass filters was eliminated to pretty good success. I actually find it quite interesting in itself for this comment, because moire was always a problem for digital sensors. That's why they put AA filters there. But as of, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, when AA filters kind of becoming a thing of the past, and a lot of camera manufacturers decided to remove them to improve resolutions and sharpness. I actually haven't seen that problem much anymore.
I think my feeling is related to resolution. So back in the day when the DSLR had 6 million pixels, moire really was a thing. But once you got to cameras with resolutions of say 24 megapixels and up, it no longer seems to be the issue it was. So you can just ditch AA filters and hardly ever get moire. So I think it's kind of resolution related. But I've got an old Nikon D50, 6 million pixels, which supposedly has an AA filter. I don't think it's a very strong one, but that gets quite bad moire. But I've since used a lot of cameras of 24 megapixels and above with no AA filters. Very rarely do I see it. But then I don't shoot fashion where you've got these very fine...
fabric, yes.
That's fine, right. Rectilinear textures.
Yes,
where
yes.
we, a little tilt can
Yeah, I mean,
introduce this
the reason
worry.
I say that is because I noticed it myself because I photograph people a lot. There is I usually get more from whatever they wear, and
Yeah,
yeah. So I remember the days when I was using my Canon 5D, and even that camera had AA filters. I still get more, like regardless. So I had to kind of use some special software at the time to remove it
yeah,
altogether. To be quite honest, the software back in the days weren't that good either. So like even if you try to remove them, you still got a little bit left. So you can't really avoid them altogether. But even like after a while, when I moved on from Canon and I was shooting with Leica, Leica hasn't got AA filters. I think my M240. Then moved into the Olympus cameras. I didn't see anything, even though they're only
no.
20 megapixels. So it seems that somehow maybe even the raw converters in this Lightroom has somehow resolved it and doesn't need anymore.
I think it's resolution. I think the
Right.
sensors now capture the resolution where they tend not to meet in the real world
Yep.
patterns of the same frequency.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I think the frequency of patterns users cause some worry is a problem because sensors had a resolution quite close to that. But now sensor resolution is way beyond that. So you tend not to get that interference with those patterns. That's my take on it. That's what I seem to see as DSLRs developed. So
Okay.
Nikon dropped AA filters when it went to, I think it might have been is it the 14? I think it's probably the 24 megapixel sensor.
Yep.
And you never got moire anyway that I saw.
Yeah.
So I think it's a resolution thing.
Okay, understood. So just looking at other comments as well, and Andrew said, "Don't forget the CR123A batteries as well, Rod."
Oh, I didn't have those. I think it's at the S2 Pro, so I had the S3 Pro. So mine was probably technically very advanced. So you didn't have to put coal in the boiler anymore. I don't know.
I presume the CR123A is for the meter, right, or the internal clock. And
I would think so. I'd imagine it's like an old camera design that needs a tiny button cell just to remember stuff, isn't it? And I wonder, does my S3 Pro have one? I don't know.
Yeah, because you need it run, right? Yeah.
Actually, it's a good point because I seem to remember a few cameras did used to need them. Even what we might call relatively modern DSLRs had them, but you hardly ever knew about it because they just lasted indefinitely. I seem to remember there were a few early DSLRs that needed a little button cell to remember who they were and why they were there.
That's interesting. And Angelo just joined us. Hello, Angelo. And you got a comment about Fuji. Fuji said that they use APS-C as this has more volume. I presume you talk about sensor volumes, and then the full frame due to that manufacturing taking them seriously. Is that a thing? Like why they chose APS-C over full frame or micro four third in terms of developments? Because they started these DSLR in APS-C format anyway.
I suspect you might get a different answer depending on who you speak to. I have the feeling with Fujifilm from conversations with them in the past that it's what's that famous historical book, Cheng, The Art of War, something like that.
Yep.
One of the sayings is find the enemy where it isn't. So I think Fujifilm is making cameras in a space where other brands aren't, and I don't think there's a whole lot. It might look like there's competition in the APS-C market, but so. And of course, they've kind of practically reinvented medium format on their own. Yep. So yep. I think they've chosen not to be in full frame because that's where everybody else is. But next year, it may be a different story. I don't know.
Well, that's something that is interesting because obviously sidetracked a little bit because we'll talk about synthesizers. Is like OM System also make the same. OM System made the same statement. They said they're never ever gonna do full frame. They just want to stick with Micro Four Thirds because they,
Yeah.
like you said, they don't want to enter the full frame war when everybody's fighting for a little bit of a slice of a cake, and so it's gonna be very fierce in that space. And as you can see, the Panasonic is obviously fighting really hard in that market space at the moment. And you got more and more players joining the fold, and it's getting a little bit complicated there. And they're still only getting 2 or 3 main dominant players in the full frame world, namely the Nikon, Canon, and Sony. Leica full frame and Panasonic full frame is kind of like a little bit of a crumb on the side at the moment. So it's interesting because there are manufacturers who believe that they shouldn't enter the full frame market, and I would really like to hear your thoughts about whether Fuji should enter full frame at some point, or you think their strategy sticking with the APS-C and the medium format is the way to go. And I do agree, the medium, they have practically reinvented the medium format market, or at least larger format format, simply because I still wouldn't want to call them medium format because they're nowhere near the same size as the medium format films, and just slightly larger than 35mm.
It's only phase 1 really, and I don't know whether Hasselblad still does its H6 series. I think they were like 645 size or close to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Hasselblad X1 and X2D range and Fujifilm GFX range, they're like APS-C medium format. In a way.
It is. Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah.
But Andrew's pointed out to me CL123A. Yeah, I know what they are now. I'll have a look. Yeah,
they're basically a little bit shorter than an AA battery.
Yeah, that must have been the S2 Pro, not the S3 Pro. Anyway.
In fact, my old SLRs from Canon used the 123A. It kind of go in the grip. Do I still have one in there? I may still have one inside. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't used this camera for a while, and I should go back to it. Right. Okay, let's see. We got a couple more comments here. Stan just released one. One thing to remember is that the smaller the circle of confusion sensor size, the sharper the optic made for that size. At the end of the day, I think Fuji has really nailed it.
I'll have to ponder the technicalities in that for a short time. But I will say, I found the X-T5 has led to both triumph and disaster. So so the 40 megapixel sensor in the X-T5 does have a beautiful look to it. It's very different under magnification. However, it also reveals any inadequacies in the lenses, and I hope I won't offend any Fujifilm owners if I point out 2 lenses. There's the 16 to 80 f4, which looks like it ought to be really, really useful and is in theory really useful, and the 10 to 24 f4, which looks like it kind of go-to wide-angle zoom.
Yeah.
I had both, and neither was good enough, so they've both gone. And at the moment, I'm just using the Fujifilm primes. But I think what that showed me is that, in a sense, you have to be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Because everyone wants more resolution.
Yeah.
But when you get it, you find that lenses that used to be all right aren't anymore. And that can get very expensive. So I think everyone who wants a 25 megapixel MFT camera, I think that's fine. That's not too much of a worry. But if you start getting higher, say 30 megapixels, you might suddenly find all the lenses you thought were fabulous on a 20 megapixel camera, suddenly they're not good enough anymore.
Yeah.
So you've gone from a system where everything was good to one where only the camera's good. So I think Fujifilm might be kind of in that territory now, because that sensor, it's a gorgeous sensor, but a lot of the lenses aren't, which is a worry.
not matching the same performance.
No.
No, and I'm not sure anyone actually remember or old enough to remember Canon went through that same phase as well. And when they had the full frame DSLRs, the EOS 1 and also the original 5D Mark 1 I'm talking about, they were 12 megapixels, so they weren't exactly high resolution. So all the lenses seems to be performing brilliantly. And as soon as they jump from the Mark 1 to Mark 2, from the 12 to 24 or 23, and that's when they started to struggle. And only a handful of L lenses are able to match the resolution at the time. And a lot of the traditionally good lenses, like the 51.4 standard prime, suddenly becomes horrible. Like when you shoot wide open, you find it really soft, and even in the center, you have to stop the lens down to 2.8 to get anything sharp. And that's the problem with a lot of the older lenses, legacy lenses. They needed to upgrade them. So Canon went through a phase when they had to literally redesign a lot of the older lenses and bring up Mark II, Mark III lenses just to be able to keep up with the sensor resolution upgrades. But then Canon didn't really stop there, of course. After the Mark II, and they're going to continue bumping up the resolutions to 50. I think it was the EOS 5DR, was it a 5D? I can't remember exactly which one it was, which has a much higher resolution sensor. That made the matter even worse because they didn't even upgrade all the lenses yet, and they already bring a high resolution camera. So that wasn't really nice. I think you're quite right there. So really be careful what you're wishing, and if you in a system or brand, and you're for a long time, for instance, let's say OM system has had the 20 megapixel for quite a while. All the lenses are kind of matched that resolutions. They're performing brilliant in that resolution. You just don't know if they're going to one day upgrade it to 24, maybe 30 megapixel. You may find yourself a lot of the lenses that you love may not actually work that well with that sort of resolution.
I think as well, I mean, not everyone is like me, but what I find is if the resolution of my shots is limited by the camera, I think, oh, well, it's just what it is. But if suddenly I see that the lenses aren't good, that bothers me a whole lot more. I think with those two particular Fujinon zooms, they're okay on an XT1, which has got 16 megapixels, because the particular weakness of those zooms is edge definition at longer focal lengths.
Yeah.
And you notice it on an XT1, but it's all right. But then on an XT5, they just are absolutely awful. And I found them pretty unbearable, so they had to go. So at the moment, I did hope that I could use my XT5 and my Fujifilm system as kind of everyday dog's body travel camera for everything, for which you need zooms. But those two zooms weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And the only two zooms that are good enough cost twice as much and weigh twice as much, and they're just not suitable.
No.
So we had a conversation a few talks ago about choose your lenses.
Yes.
Then worry about the camera. So I would have been better taking a couple of OM lenses, which I know are very good performers right across the zoom range, right across the frame, across the aperture range, and then taking, you might say, a lesser camera, but knowing that the lenses were good, instead of taking a brilliant camera with not very good lenses. I'd rather the other way around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And but just to add on to it before we move on to the next point is that for those who may wonder, I mean, obviously you may all know that I have the G9 Mark II, which is right here, also the GX6. So they're both 24 megapixel micro four third cameras, and from all the pro lenses that I've used on these cameras, they seem to be just as good. So I think the if OM system does bumped up the resolution at some point to 24, 26, I don't think you're going to have much problem with it, because I've kind of tested it already on the high megapixel count sensor for these lenses. So just to look at another comment from Angelo. Panasonic, I feel that they want to be a niche play in full frame, more towards video market. The only problem is that the cheap APS-C camera is entry point for the new full frame user. I'm not I know we kind of sidetracked a little bit, but let's answer this question here, 'cause I think it's quite interesting. Do you think Panasonic wants to be a niche full frame player? I don't know if there is such a thing called niche full frame player. I know they want to focus on videos, but think about both Nikon, Sony, and also Canon have their video arm or making more very video centric cameras, also in full frame. So that means that if your comment is valid, that means Panasonic will also still be fighting with the same space with these people. And Canon's already quite an established kind of like a movie making cine camera in that way anyway. So is Sony. So it's going to be hard.
I think Panasonic's particular issue, and I don't think Panasonic is alone. My feeling is that Fujifilm has been quite clever in choosing a persona for its brand, whereas Panasonic doesn't really have a persona. It just follows the market and tries to produce the right product for the way the market's going. The Panasonic cameras are very effective, but you wouldn't say they had a particular character that set them apart from any other, would you? I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but do you know what I mean? Fujifilm has been very good at that. Panasonic, they just make machines.
That's definitely an interesting point there, and don't worry, we're going to come back to Panasonic in a separate chat altogether.
Yeah.
So we're going to reserve our judgment, maybe a little bit of discussion until later day. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I think your comment is certainly make me think a little now about persona. I think that's the right word for it. So in terms of persona, let's go back to Fujifilm a little bit, and let's say that what you just said there. Fujifilm has a really good persona, and how do you define Fujifilm in that case?
I think the cameras it makes are deliberately a little bit different. I think so. If you take the XT series, when everybody else was making generic cameras you had mode dials, you had control wheels. Everything was done via the interface. Fujifilm made the XT series and the X Pro series that had external dials. And I think in a way they anticipated future trends because at the time people just wanted electronics in boxes. And they had no interest in styling or legacy or film looks. That was all bunk. They just wanted efficient image capture devices. But it turns out not everybody does want that. So if you're a professional photographer, you just want a tool. But if you're creative or an amateur, you want something that makes you feel engaged and inspired. And that's what I think Fujifilm has done quite well, because they made cameras that are perfect, but they made them with a particular look and a style that is appealed to this kind of more artistic leaning, They don't do anything other cameras don't. They just do it in a different way that struck a chord with a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about how you said that, anticipating a trend, and I think they almost like betting on the trend, and somehow it pays off, and which I think they have done it, especially for the X100 series and the X100 Mark 1 when it first came out. It was
brave.
Cool. It was brave move, and it was literally trying to compete or make take a homage to Leica cameras, a rangefinder with optical viewfinder. Obviously, it's a hybrid finder, but the overall aesthetic is literally a Leica camera, and just doesn't cost as much. And the performance wasn't exactly great at the time with the X100 Mark 1 and the Mark 2. And then I think since the Mark 3 and 4, it has dramatically improved the autofocus speed, and it really made a difference and in terms of performance. But as a camera, the how people now view Fujifilm cameras, I think that they certainly whatever they bet on the XT the X series cameras has definitely pay off, and especially since the Mark 5, now it's becoming a a trend, and not only a trend, a desirable product. I wouldn't even say camera. It's a desirable product that any trendy people would like to get hold of. Whether they actually shoot or not. I actually saw the other day when I was walking Westminster, and I saw a couple, just walking along the bridge, taking some photos of Big Ben. And it's obviously the boyfriend was taking most of the photo, and he was using a Sony. I think Rod just went. So he was. Oh yeah, your camera just went. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I can hear your voice.
I'll see if I can rejoin. Hang on a moment.
Okay, so he was using a Sony camera, and his girlfriend was carrying a Fuji X100. I'm not sure which one it was. It looks like to me it's either the 5 or the 6, which is the latest one. I don't think she shoots at all. The camera was in mint condition, in half leather case, and the cap was on. So it's almost like she was carrying the X100 camera as a fashion statement, so to speak. So and I have seen this quite often actually around central London. I've seen a lot of female actually. Carrying the X100 series, just across the body, almost like a little handbag, and it's almost like a fashion statement. It is what it is. I'm not saying that they don't photograph or shoot anything, but from what I can see, the cap was on, the camera's off, and
you're taking a hole, Jimmy. You're taking a hole.
But the boyfriend was taking photo of her, so it's just it's something that I think is kind of quite say about how successful Fujifilm has made the product. I'm not suggesting or trying to be sexist here to talk about who takes what or not, but as how the business is going and how they design the products and launch the product and also market the products, they have done a phenomenal job in appealing into these people who may or may not have a major interest in photography.
I'm going to throw it back at you just slightly and say, if you walk into a room with people that you're quite keen to impress,
yep,
would you rather be carrying one camera rather than another?
Yes.
So, for example, would you rather be seen in certain company with your ZF rather than a Lumix, for example? I mean, I think we're all like this a little bit. We all would prefer to be seen with a certain type or style of camera. I mean, it sounds daft, but in some ways we do.
It is. I mean, it also is about client's perception as well, right? And it's not so much about me. However, I know what you just said there. Most of the time, I just don't really give a monkey about what people see me. And
Right.
but I've been told from a few colleagues of mine in the wedding industries, especially some from Asia. They told me that they asked their staff, photographers, there's a company with five or six photographers. They have asked their photographer to carry. I mean, the company obviously buy the cameras for them to carry. So listen to the word carry. They don't shoot with them. They all carry a Leica camera. They all carry a Leica rangefinder camera around the neck. They don't shoot with them. They shoot Nikon. But their company is appealing to very high profile social elite, kind of people. So they are in that environment. So they need to show people that they are in that same kind of level. Financially, not necessarily skills wise, but they need to appeal to those people. So rather than carry a big heavy DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, they just need to hold a couple of Leicas around the neck, which about 10 grand each. And that's what it is.
Well, in a sense as well, it's if you're going to charge big bucks for social events, it's kind of a proof or a kind of justification for doing that, isn't it? I was trying to think of a similar example. If you're going to charge 4 times as much to do a wedding as the next photographer, then you'd better turn up with a Hasselblad. Then it'll be all right. Just around your neck, don't shoot with it. But it's a similar thing. I think it's it reassures the client that the huge amount of money you're charging them has actually gone on something. Probably.
And Stan just replied here, most definitely. I mean, if I could afford it, I would have the M series or the Q2 or 3 around the shoulder when mingling.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, it's almost like a conversation starter, right? You know, when you're carrying a camera like that,
yeah.
and then people just say, "Oh, what do you shoot?" You know, you got a nice camera there, and it just you know, kind of generating some sort of conversations and yeah, it's interesting. But something, I mean, I could save you a few bucks if you want to listen to me. Is that you don't have to carry a very expensive camera, but buy a very nice camera bag that also works as well.
Get Billingham.
Yeah, get a Billingham. You can hide your camera. Yeah, you can hide the camera in the back.
Or you can just have the right camera just poking slightly at the top so people see, even if you never shoot with it. But
Yeah.
we should compile a list of hip cameras that are good to be seen with.
Yes. And anyone who's listening right now, give me a list of hip cameras that you think is going to be so popular that is going to, like, you know, everybody's going to cry for it and start talking to you.
So I was
wondering.
cool. I was wondering when to start doing talks for camera clubs again. I haven't quite decided about that, but if I do, I'll make sure I turn up with the right camera. Just because, just to set the tone, you know.
yeah, of course. Just before we continue there, I saw just Angela asking you, Rod, a question.
Oh, right, okay.
A question to Rod. How does Fujifilm GFX line in the market? Tony Northrup keeps saying that it does not getting market share or farewell, but I don't think as they have a lot of new lenses.
Tony Northrup says a lot of stuff.
That's the
Tony and Chelsea.
Tony and Chelsea show, yes.
Yeah. He says a lot of stuff. I think
he says a lot of stuff.
I think if it wasn't working, Fujifilm would stop doing it. Camera makers are very good at stopping doing something that isn't working. I think we can take it that it's working pretty well.
Yeah, I believe so.
I don't know where Tony gets his figures.
No, in his own mind. I think that's the market's always the market's always in his mind only.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on. Sorry.
No. I think the Fujifilm medium format is actually doing quite well. I mean, I see a lot of photography actually use them. People may be overthinking a little bit about lenses and lens selections, because quite often you find that a lot of people getting medium format cameras are only ever going to use one or two lenses. It's very rare they're going to have a range of lenses to do like a lot of different things. And don't forget that medium format is also a niche camera format on its own. It's going to be slower than DSLRs or smaller format cameras, so they're not going to have fast sports with these sort of cameras. So in that case, they're not going to have big tele zoom lenses or anything like that for sports photography, birds in flight and things like that. It's not built for that sort of scenario, so you're not going to get those lenses. You may have ultra wide, you know, a bit of a tele, medium tele, just to do a little bit of detail shots and things like that, products perhaps. But ultra wide angle, I think for landscape people who people who like a lot of details and blow big, and those will be the lenses that the medium format will be focusing on. That's only my 2 cents about medium formats, because that's how I always see them in the analog days. You don't see them having big long tele lenses, and that's just not it is.
I think it's kind of the same today. I think they're used in situations where you've got a bit more time. You're never going to get the same range of focal lengths and fast apertures that you do with smaller formats. So I kind of think they're being used today, and they were in a way that medium format was used in the past for commercial jobs where quality is everything. You've got the time to do it properly, and the client wants the best possible results. So I think they're kind of in that same territory, but they are a bit more mobile. So things like the GFX cameras, they can be used handheld quite easily to have stabilization out, so there's no problem there. I think there might be some issues with video, because I need to look into the precise mathematics of it, but it's pretty hard getting a 100 megapixel sensor to capture video without massive crops or line skipping or pixel binning or some other clutch. You can't oversample 100 megapixels of data down to 4K.
Yeah, of course, of
that,
course.
that I'm aware of.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not the GFX expert right here, and but I'm just looking at another comment here. Stan, just very quickly.
Yeah, no, it's right. It's right. Yeah.
At least PenF kind of does that already. I'll talk about the attracting attentions, and thanks to Rod for convincing me to keep one.
I knew you'd regret it, Stan, if you didn't. They don't take up a lot of space. I think you make a good point about what lenses are missing. I think if you are shooting professionally and commercially, there probably aren't any lenses missing from the GFX lineup. It's not going to be cheap, but there will be the lenses there that you need. You don't get the super zooms, you don't get 5x zooms, you don't get f1.2s and all of that. But these are only kind of on the periphery of most photography. Yeah. Most photography, especially high-end commercial photography, is talking about a much smaller range of focal lengths and apertures. So I think the GFX line has it covered. It'll never have the same kind of, never have lenses as fast or the zoom ranges you get with the smaller format. But that's probably not really what people who use them need.
No. And also, I think that the GFX development and also it's not going to be at the same pace as their smaller siblings, and because it doesn't need to. So I don't think that the lens choices are going to be expanded as such like the smaller formats do, and so is the camera itself. You're going to see a much slower development than the APS-C format in the Fujifilm cam. You can see that already. You know, the two models that they have here is just only receiving minor updates here and there every so often. It's not going to be a significant thing. Because medium formats always play well with the fidelities of the color space and also the obviously resolutions. If you've got a bigger sensor, you can do that. So it's just a matter of time before we can see any a major overhaul of the GFX line. That's how I see it.
But don't forget that they're updating the GFX cameras as often as they are the X mount. Pretty much. I mean, you've got the GFX 102 now, which is quite a powerful beast. So it's not like they've just made them and stopped. I just think you won't quite get the same pace of development because they don't need it. I think what I would say is, which kind of comes around slightly, this question Mark has asked, Mark Hasler, about which brand has the best lenses. Oh dear. I think I would say that I've reviewed quite a few GFX lenses and I've been very impressed by all of them. I haven't seen a bad one. I've reviewed even more X-mount lenses and I have seen some bad ones. I've just got rid of 2 of them. So you can't, it's not a brand thing. I think it's perhaps a cost thing and a kind of user level thing.
Yes.
So I think who makes the best lenses, I would say, if you're talking affordable, professional quality lenses, I'd say I'd still stick with OM, because if you stick to pro lenses, you know you're going to get a certain level of quality and it'll be good. I wouldn't care to guarantee that with the consumer lenses.
No.
And I think with Lumix, the Panasonic lenses, I think the Leica badged ones are probably on a par pretty much with the Olympus Pro lenses. The other consumer lenses, not as good. So it depends on how much you pay. But I think if we're going to stick to talking about Fujifilm, I think the primes, I don't think you can really go far wrong. I think the zooms, in my experience, you actually can go wrong with the latest sensors.
Right.
I think
so it's only because they weren't built for that resolution, right?
They've never been, in my opinion, that great. So Fujifilm is not alone here. Canon and Nikon and Sony have made kind of consumer grade lenses of variable quality. So my only real issue with Fujifilm is if you want professional quality, you're looking at the 16-55 2.8
Yeah.
and the 8-16 2.8, and the what is it 40-1. I'm trying to think what the 40-140 f2.8. That's not right. But the 70-200 f2.8 equivalent. These are all red badge lenses
Yeah.
for professional quality, but they're big. They're as big as full frame equivalents. So
Yeah.
you can get the quality in Fujifilm zooms, but suddenly you're talking about big sizes, and they don't
Yes.
fit well on the APS-C bodies, in my opinion. There are lots of photographers who don't have a problem and will wonder what my beef is. It depends on how you like your cameras to handle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I probably mentioned this before. Before I made my transition from full frame to micro four third back in the days, I did sample some Fujifilm cameras and from some of my friends who used them before I made my decision. And at the time when I was testing the Fujifilm cameras and their lenses that they have, most of them were supposedly the pro grade lenses that would kind of replace my trinities of lenses from the Canons, you know, the 2470, the 1635, and the 7200 2.8. So it's the equivalent in the APS-C format. What I found is that I don't know whether they have updated those lenses since, and but the three lenses that I tried on the APS-C X Pro 2 and also the XT2 at the time, and I found them to be just as big, maybe slightly smaller, maybe just slightly smaller than the Canon full-frame lenses, but they weren't that much smaller or lighter.
No, they're not. They're not. They are cheaper.
Yep.
But they're also as big. So you start to question, you start to think, well, look, I'm trying to chase a professional level of image quality here, and I'm ending up with gear that's just as big as if I'd just gone straight to full frame.
Yeah.
So I think if Fujifilm has to look at its zooms and figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Because the consumer zooms, I haven't tried the new 16-50 kit lens.
Right.
Everyone raves about the older 18-55 f2 to f4, f2.8 to f4. I've used several examples of that. I've not found it to be that good. Other people's experience is obviously different. I don't think that's a great lens, but it's probably better than the 16-80. But I do feel that Fujifilm makes some very, very, very nice primes, but I think the zooms need a bit of an overhaul.
Okay.
That's my woe for Fujifilm.
Yeah.
I think the consumer zooms have always been like an average, but if they're going to start putting out 40 megapixel cameras, they're suddenly not good enough.
Yeah, and I think they probably wouldn't be the only ones. There are a lot of camera manufacturers. They have some older lenses that desperately needed some updates. To go with the newer stuff.
Like Canon, I keep complaining about these things. DSLR lens. Canon brought out the EOS 90D, so we got a 32.5 megapixel APS-C DSLR, and they're selling it with the EFS 18-135, which is a bad lens. Every sample I used was bad. So you've got a camera with more megapixels than ever on one of the worst kit lenses. That was not happy time. But so it's not just Fujifilm.
Yeah. We have a couple of comments here, which I will defer to later days. First of all, Anthony said that, what do you think OM System needs to do to survive as a camera company? Right, okay. I'm not going to say too much of that because, like we said at the beginning, we are going to spend a chat per brand. So this chat today is all about Fujifilm. So if you want to talk a little bit about OM, we will. Don't worry about that. And that's going to be next week. We're going to talk about OM System next week.
That's next week, is it?
That's next week, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And also remember, one brand per week. So we're going to have a few weeks to go. We're going to look at all sorts of camera brands that's currently existing and trading. We're not going to talk about brands already disappear, such as Minolta and all the others, some brands that you may or may not have heard of before. So let's have fun about this gear chit chat here, because some of you may be more of an expert than us, because I only have experience of so many brands, and so does Rod, and in between us we cover more or less everything. However, there may be some brands that you may be more familiar with, simply because you're a photographer using that brand. So we'll be very happy to listen to you as well. Chuck, and
sorry.
no, I'm just looking at Chuck's comment here. Panasonic lenses always seem to have purple flare problem.
A cheaper ones. I had for a while the 14mm f2.5.
Yep.
That was awful. All around the center, the edges that had purple fringing, chromatic aberration, call it what you like, beyond belief. That had to go. I think some of the cheaper lenses often did. I'm trying to think of other examples. I always thought the 12-60 was rather good, but no better than the Olympus 12-40. What else did I try from Panasonic? Should we talk about Panasonic another day? Otherwise, I'm going off the wrong direction, aren't I?
We should talk about Panasonic another day.
Okay, so sticking with Fujifilm, what I like about Fujifilm is, in a way, it's been doing what OM System should have done. So what you do get with Fujifilm, I've moaned about the zooms, so I'll stop there. But there are some really nice little primes. That's 16 f2.8, so it's not particularly fast, but it's quite small, and it's not ambitious lens optically, only an f2.8, but it's very good performance for the price. Because it's not overstretching its technical capabilities.
I think people, a lot of the time I often find is that people may have kind of undermined a lot of these slightly slower prime lenses, and because they are actually pretty good, and because of the aperture size, they can make them relatively small and compact. And don't forget that they are not slow by any means, even though you might think, it's only 2.8, prime should be at least 1.4, 1.8. But look, your professional zoom lenses are 2.8, so you can't call them slow, No. So like 2.8 is perfectly fine. It can be used in most scenarios, even in some dimmer situations. Yes, you may have to boost the ISO a little bit more for a stop or two, but it's not at the end of the day in today's digital world. We have a lot of denoising software that can perfectly fine to get rid of some of the unwanted dots in the photos, but the 2.8 primes are perfectly okay. I use some of the 2.8 primes myself in the various different systems, and I find them to be very effective. And very often you find a lot of these 2.8 prime lenses are very sharp, actually, very, very sharp compared to the faster lenses.
So that's my Fujinon 27mm f2.8. So that's a 40mm equivalent, and it's super sharp. You might think of a pancake lens, it's going to be a bit rubbish. It's not rubbish at all. It's extremely good. And one other is my 33mm f2. So again, it's only an f2. That's not great, is it? But it's very small.
It is, yes.
And if I look at all the times when I've been out shooting and thought, oh gosh, if only I had f1.4. I don't think it's happened actually, but if it did, I'd just put up with it and shoot an f2. It's not a big thing.
No.
And lastly, I'll take the hood off because it's massive with the hood on. That's my 8mm f3.5. Now, f3.5, that's pretty weak for a prime, but this is a small lens, and I can actually carry it around. And I don't mind having it in my bag. So I think Angelo's asked in the comments, do I think Fujifilm X-Mount is a great competitor for Micro Four Thirds? These lenses, for me, are what Olympus or OM System should have done. They have to a degree, but the only difference is you don't get aperture rings, which I love. But this is where OM Olympus were strongest, I think. compact cameras, compact lenses. So I think if you ever were to feel that OM System was stepping away from an old pen lineup and didn't really have the cameras for you anymore, I would say that Fujifilm is the brand for you. I'm not trying to make you switch brands. I'm just saying the lens range is exactly what you would like to see from OM System, I think, if you're into that kind of compact prime lens photography.
Yeah, I think you have a point there, and certainly indeed, you know, like these sort of little lenses from OM System or Olympus before that, and they are quite old. You know, this is 25 1.8. It's still a great lens by all means, but let's say like the conversation we had earlier, if at some point OM System decided to up the resolutions of the sensor, these lenses may start to show its age. And at the moment, the 20 megapixel, you can definitely get away with it. And but I have pro lenses. I can certainly see the advantage of the pro lenses. They are sharp. Like I said, I tested on the 24 megapixel Panasonic cameras. They still look really good, really sharp. Same thing can't be said with the 25 1.8 right here, and it does start to show a little bit of softness and at the wide open 1.8 aperture, but only just. So it will probably just, you know, I would say doable in the 24 megapixel, but anything higher, they would definitely have to start thinking about, you know, maybe a Mark II design to refresh the 1.8 prime lines. And so at the moment, I would say that for the short term, these prime lenses are still good, but anything, you know, if OM suddenly decided to pump up something more than 24, and definitely something that we'll have to consider.
Yeah, I see. That surprises me, because I think those little primes would have been all right at 25 megapixels. But who knows? Who knows?
You know, I'm only speaking between the pro lenses and this one here, and like I said, it's still good, but the pro lenses definitely can resolve more in high resolution terms.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's certainly true. Chuck L wants to know if you're bought into both MFT and full frame is the reason to invest in APS-C. No, I don't think so. Except again, I would say. Sorry, I've just heard somebody at the door.
Right, I'll chip in my little bit of a. Oh, okay.
I would say again what we said before. Start with the lenses.
Yeah.
So, if you need excellent quality, long zoom, quite fast lenses that you can afford and don't weigh a ton, I would say MFT is the format.
Yeah.
If you definitely need the quality and the shallow look of full frame, then full frame's the only way to go. It's a done deal. The only time I would recommend APS-C instead of those two is in the case of Fujifilm. It happens to have lenses of a type and a design which I particularly like. So I wouldn't choose APS-C for any other reason, because to me, full frames become affordable. Micro Four Thirds is extremely practical. Why would I want anything in between? It's just that particular set of lenses appeals to me. But also, if we're going to talk about the kind of woolly color science thing again, there is a definite look to Fujifilm sensors, particularly this new one. And I can't easily put my finger on it, but at a kind of pixel level, most camera sensors produce something that looks quite digital.
Yeah.
But you don't get that with this particular sensor. It's quite odd. It's quite odd. It looks really analog. But going back to the whole why would you choose APS-C thing, I would say only for the lenses. I don't think the cameras themselves necessarily have anything you can't find elsewhere. They're in a kind of middle ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we actually had this kind of chat, maybe a few chats before. One particular lens that I really like and want to try and own from Fujifilm is the APD lens. You know, that's the lens that I really, the 56 1.2, I believe, APD.
You'll have to get it while you can, so I think that's disappearing even as we speak.
Yeah, so the only way that I think that I would like to have a Fujifilm is because of that particular lens there, and all the other lenses, range-wise and quality-wise, like I could get both from either both my full-frame Nikon and also my MFT platform, so I don't necessarily need to have any lenses in kind of in between, like you said there. But that doesn't stop me from thinking about or dreaming about maybe owning a GFX system at some point, and because that's different. That is a different format. So I may want to try that at some point. We have Arrow just asked a question about that. Here, is Fuji Primes better or Zoom when it comes to event photography?
I'm
That's
going
a
to
tricky
tell you
question.
I'm going to tell you my experience. If you don't mind using the Fujifilm red badge lenses, they're cheap. Certainly cheaper than full frame equivalents, but they're just as big. If you don't mind using those, I'd say the zooms, because with event photography, I mean, Jimmy will know more about this than me. Sometimes if you're indoors, you can work with the prime because you know where things are going to happen and you know where you need to stand.
Yep.
If you're outdoors or kind of following things as they unfold, or following people around, I think you need a zoom, because
Yeah.
you can't always get to the spot you need to be at quickly enough with a prime.
Yeah.
You need that flexibility.
Absolutely. I would say that to summarize it is probably depending on how dynamic your event is.
Yes,
or,
yeah,
or,
yeah,
or, or the
yeah,
subject, how often your subject is going to move around the venue, and
yeah,
that really dictates what lenses you may want to use.
yeah,
Less so about light. I know lights can play a factor here because primes obviously have a brighter aperture, so you can either use a faster shutter speed or low ISO for the same shot. You're looking at two or three stops slower when using primes versus zoom, so that depends really how quickly they move. Do you need to freeze the moment? If you're relatively still, you can sometimes get away with 150, 160 aperture. I mean shutter speed. So that means I don't think a 2.8 a zoom is going to be any difference to 1.4 prime.
and you don't have to stick to one or the other. What you could do is have, say, I wish I could remember what that Fujinon equivalent is. Is it 40 to 140 f2.8? I
Not entirely sure.
just apologize. I apologize if I'm wrong, but the one I mean is like the 70 to 200 2.9 equivalent.
Yep.
That is an extremely useful lens for event photography, because you get nice separation, you've got quite a fast lens, excellent image quality. That's why you have one of these lenses for events. So I think that'd be a great zoom to have. But I think a fast 85mm equivalent, say the 56 1.2,
Yep.
would be great
Yeah.
in different situations, during the ceremony, indoors for the speeches, the cake cutting or whatever, anything where you know where stuff is going to happen and you can be in the right place.
Yes.
Then the prime is good, and you get the other advantages of background separation,
Yeah.
nice bokeh,
Yeah.
and everything else.
Absolutely, and also another note to you as well, Arrow, is that obviously I photograph a lot of events before and also weddings. What you will see a lot of the events photographers do is they usually carry two cameras. So they have one zoom on one shoulder and a prime on the other, or maybe two zooms, and one wide, one telly. So they literally trying to cover all eventualities, so to speak, and with just two cameras there. I think that may be the way to go, if you are serious in getting into event photography, because you do need to cover it. You don't necessarily have time to go back to your back and switch lenses and things like that. So you really need to be ready to cover everything. So two cameras is quite a norm. If you go to see any event photography, you see them carrying at least two cameras on each shoulder.
You haven't got time to change lenses.
No.
And you look like an amateur if you're fiddling around with lenses when stuff is happening you should be photographing. So yeah, two cameras.
Two cameras.
or two shooters. Two shooters.
Yeah.
If you can afford to hire someone.
Okay. We have Blaine. Ollie 7518 is an example of non-pro lens that I believe can resolve at least 30 megapixels even at this age. I believe so.
I think it depends on the characteristics of the lens, because if a lens just doesn't quite have the same bite as a pro lens,
Yep.
you can forgive it. But where what put me off these Fujinon zooms and what stops me using other lenses that I don't like is where the edge sharpness like falls off a cliff and you can't miss it
Yeah.
and you can't fix it. That is quite unpleasant. So if so for example, I think my Fujinon 27mm isn't quite as sharp as the 16mm, but it's not a big difference and it's consistent across the frame and it doesn't bother me. But if it just fell away completely at the edges, I would hate that and it would have to go. So it depends on. So I think if the 75 1.8 is sharp across the frame, I would probably find that just as good on a higher resolution sensor, even if it wasn't quite as sharp as a pro lens. Wouldn't bother me too much.
Yeah, no, I think the 75 1.8 is definitely one of the sharpest lenses in the non-pro range. I mean, I don't personally use that lens a lot in the MFT because 75 is equivalent to 150 in the full frame, so it's a pretty long lens for portrait. So you do need the space to work with, unless you're specifically doing headshot a lot, which I did use that lens for headshots. So it's not a lens I would like to use too much. My usual go-to for portraits tends to be the 45 range, which is kind of 90, 85 in full frame. That would be my range. Other than that, you do need a lot of space to work with that kind of focal length. And you're
going to get people getting in the way, aren't you? Because they don't know you're taking the picture because you're like in a different room. So.
pretty much. But it's a nice lens. I mean, I have to say it's a very nice lens. Okay, and Blaine also continued there. I haven't used Fuji, but it seems that it leans super hard into street photography. Am I wrong on that assumption?
I think Fujifilm is leaning into everything that might look like it's on trend. I wouldn't say I'm not meaning to sound cynical. I wouldn't say it's street photography in a classic sense. I think Fujifilm is leaning into anything where you're engaging with a busy, active, beautiful, wonderful life. And it that can often look like street photography.
It's
I think
lifestyle.
That's what Fujifilm
it's lifestyle.
It is lifestyle. Yes. Yeah, Fujifilm is leaning into lifestyle. Yeah. And it's definitely trying to attract the creator market, which is, as we know, is how people try to sell their wonderful lives. That sounded bad. I didn't mean to sound as bad as that, but it's what it is, isn't it? It's look at this wonderful life I'm leading.
Yeah, well, look, it is a
check
market
my
nonetheless.
yeah.
It is a market nonetheless. You know, like
yes.
It's
probably the biggest market now. It's probably bigger than conventional photography.
Yeah,
because everyone wants to be a celebrity. And if you can sell them a camera, brilliant. You know, there's a market.
There is a market, and in fact, you know, like you do see that the market overtaking the traditional photography market. Simply because, you know, the people who are really serious about their gear are usually the diehard photographers and who really looking for technical capabilities and abilities and quality. While the other side, the lifestyle, it seems to be the bigger chunk of the market is they care less about those stuff.
Well, let's face it, the traditional market's not going to get any bigger, is it?
No.
But the other market we're talking about is booming. So, and I think to a degree, we're all kind of shifting into that way of working anyway, because I think anyone who's in photography for a living is trying to build an audience. And if they're not now, they will be soon, because that's where success lies these days.
Yes, absolutely. And Arrow reply, and thank you so much. I own more primes and no zooms, and I do wedding event portraits and headshots. So you are a veteran. So that means you probably understand what I was trying to say there. So you know, whether you even you have only primes, there's no problem. You could just have two primes and two shoulders, and just one wide, one medium. You know that should do the thing. And but I think a zoom could be quite handy sometimes, and just because. Especially at an event where the subject is moving in and out a lot, and I think having a zoom can be quite practical in those cases.
I think it depends on the kind of client you get as well. And
Yeah.
I think there are some in the old days, the bride and groom, I guess, went exactly where the photographer told them when they told them to do it. But these days, people hire a photographer and expect them to follow them around like Cartier-Bresson and just capture wonderful moments without them having to do anything. So I think depending on the kind of client you have, you may be able to choose your spot, or you may have to kind of chase around. And if you have to chase around, it does feel like a zoom is going to get you out of a hole more often.
Yeah. And Arrow continues to say that I'm hopefully waiting for the X Pro 4. You think that's gonna come? You know, like I suspect they may actually kill it off. I'm not entirely sure whether that is true. And they're gonna focus on the X100 series for the rangefinder style camera, and then the XT series for the kind of SLR style retro cameras. And I think they're consolidating what they're doing right now.
Do you know, I'd rather have an XE5 than an X Pro 4, I think, because I think the S Pros were always a bit big and kind of a bit over the top, but I always like the XE series, but I'm not sure we're going to get either.
Yeah,
I think we were lucky to get the XT50.
Yeah, I think the X Pro series is always a puzzle for me, and it's a great camera. Don't get me wrong. I like the aesthetic, and I certainly like the look of it. It's definitely I'm more leaning towards the rangefinder style camera. However, it isn't a camera that, to me, as versatile as the XT series, simply because of the ergonomics, the design of the actual thing itself. You can't use big lenses on that camera. It's got no grip, and it's not something that you can hold any big heavy lenses in front of it. It's most suited for primes, I would say, that camera.
The hybrid viewfinder is a problem too, because as Leica owners will know, there's only a very limited zoom range that an optical viewfinder can adapt to.
Yeah.
And so with the X Pro series, you can switch to the EVF, and you'll probably have to if you go very wide or very long. And then you'll find you won't switch back, and you start to think, well, why did I even have the optical finder? If you work within quite a narrow focal range, it's effective.
Yeah.
But the minute you start using a camera like the X Pro, any of the X Pro cameras with the kind of lenses that you might want to in future, the OVF becomes redundant, really, or impractical.
Well, I mean, if you look at the how Leica M rangefinders is designed and evolve over time, you would never see any rangefinder photographer using anything longer than 50. You know, they used to stick with 28, 35, and 50.
Or the lens came with a finder.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're willing to use an external finder, and rarely you'll find people using a 90mm and beyond, simply because it's just not practical. The rangefinder is, first of all, it's not accurate enough to nail focus. Because the windows become so tiny, the framing is becoming very, very difficult. And I say it because I use M lenses and Leica M for many, many years, and still shoot with them. I have 90mm, which is the long. Actually, I have 135. 135 is the longest I have for the M camera. And but even with the 135, I can't really use it without an external finder, and it's really difficult. So same thing can be said for the X Pro, because X Pro is essentially is a rangefinder camera. I mean, so if you're purely using the optical finder, you'll be lucky to do anything with anything longer than 50 equivalent. So you have to use EVF after that.
Well, you'll get the same issue that Leica had. So it was either the M10 or the M11 I had.
Yeah.
Where the optical finder could only go as far as 28mm. The 28mm lines were right at the very edge. So 28mm for me is not particularly wide. I'd prefer 24 or 20. I've had it. Well, I can't use a Leica. or I have to get some kind of weird clip-on finder.
Yeah. It's all because how rangefinders are designed is offset
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
centers, so you do have a lot of parallax error when it
That
comes
too,
to
yeah.
rangefinder. So like, unless you're very familiar with a particular focal length, you know exactly where the subject is going to be and how the rangefinder behaves, you're never going to get an accurate composition. Let's put it that way.
I think as well, when these cameras were conceived,
Yeah.
there were only a couple of lenses.
50, 35.
Yeah, exactly. Who imagined that there would ever be any other lenses than these? But then it happened. So that
35 was wide angle, right? Back in the old days.
Yeah, that's right.
Like,
yeah.
It was wide angle
believe it?
35. Yeah, now 35 is a normal lens.
It is. Yeah. 40 is the new 50.
Yeah. So things has evolved, like you don't call anything wide unless you're getting 16 or 8 millimeters.
No.
Yeah, that's crazy world there. Let's look at this here. Tommy M here. The lifestyle has taken over. Look at this sales of
Yes.
Kodak Pix Pro. That's a tiny little compact camera, right? The point and shoot thing.
I'm going to look that up because somebody told me the other day that it's selling by the truckload.
Yes,
But
apparently, and I read the article as well. The Pix Pro is taking over the world. So
isn't that the generic brand name for compact cameras with?
it's a point and shoot.
Yeah, but there's a whole bunch of them. It's not just one camera.
No, it's
the
about
Pix
3 or 4
Pro
different
brand.
models. Yes.
I mean, it's a while since I reviewed any point and shoot cameras, but I shouldn't generalize, but they've all got titchy sensors and they're horrible. But I'm not going to generalize. but
Well, it's lifestyle. It's lifestyle.
how can a Kodak Pix Pro be lifestyle? Because they're not fashionable to look at.
It's the Kodak name. It's the Kodak name, right?
It's not. But how many decades has it been since Kodak actually ceased to exist as the company we recognize? I mean, it's just an old brand that's been bought and used by
and
a manufacturer.
Tommy just replied, it's $150 camera that's selling like crazy.
Which one is it, Tommy? So I can look at it, because there are several Pix Pros.
Yeah, I mean, I did look it up, and we don't sell that many Pix Pro in the UK. I think they only sell 1 or 2 different models here. You can only get them in Amazon as well. I don't think any high street shops stock them.
That's not reassuring, is it? That's
no,
not reassuring.
but I'm pretty.
Argos, can I get them in Argos?
I'm pretty sure they're selling like crazy, and at least from the article anyway. And there you go. Yes, they are Kodak by name only these days. Yeah, and so is Yashica. I don't know if people know about Yashica. Yeah, Yashica is now keep doing these quirky little point and shoot cameras that only available from Kickstarters, which is another brand.
It's just, somebody just bought the name. It's got there's no continuity with the old manufacturer whatsoever.
Yeah.
For same with Rolly.
Yeah,
there's no
Rolly,
continuity
yes.
with the old Rolly. It's not the same company, but it's just the same name. Here we go. Pix Pros FZ55. Let's have a look at that.
Wow. Okay. While Rod is looking it up, and any other comments about Fujifilm that you would like to ask, or maybe trying to contribute to today's conversations about how they're doing right now, and also more importantly, I think we're going to spend the last section of the chat here talking about the future of Fujifilm. What do we think, and how do we think that Fuji is heading, and what sort of thing they should be doing? Now is the time for you to reflect your view on Fujifilm as a brand, if you're currently a user, and how you feel about what you're using right now, what are things that you may want them to improve or include in their future developments. And now's a good time to we share all together. So let's go back to Rod first. Have you found that the FZ55s? And
I have. It looks just like I used to review point and shoot compact cameras a lot. And as far as I can tell, they haven't changed. They haven't got better. They're still just as nasty. They weren't nasty then because we had nothing to compare them to. But now we've got DSLRs and mirrorless. And now that phones are so good, they're just horrid. So Fujifilm, I think Fujifilm has to figure out its lenses. I think its little primes are fine. It's good prime. It's f1 newer f1.4 primes are fine. The zooms are a worry. And I think maybe they ought to do what Sony has done and start thinking about shorter zoom ranges.
Yeah.
So Sony's really recently released the 16 to 25 2.8. It's a very short zoom range, but it's a more compact lens and it's a constant f2.8.
Yeah.
And there's also a 24 to 50 f2.8. Again, shorter zoom range than traditionally, but a smaller, less expensive lens. And I think both of these lenses are going to be less stressed optically. Is that a concept? So they're not trying to do too much optically. So I think there's a better chance you're going to get consistent, good performance across the frame at every aperture across the zoom range. And I think Fujifilm should have a little think about that. Try and make some lenses that perform well, maybe within a smaller envelope.
Yes. And me personally, and I think because it's quite complicated, from my point of view, is because I have full frame and also micro four thirds. APS-C is always kind of stuck in the middle, like kind of with what we discussed, before. There isn't anything that I can't get from Fujifilm that I can't get from other systems that I already own, and but as a brand, as well, so as far as product goes, I do admire how well they work with the market and how well they work with the trend and continue to produce products that consumer wants. And that is good. However, I do have one comment about I don't know whether I should use the word ethically. And it's okay, let's put it that way. Fujifilm knows exactly the demand is, and from the cameras, they know how well the X100 is being received by consumers and customers. The X105 has been sold out, for many months, and people can't get hold of it in waiting lists and whatnot. Now they have the X106, and it's still the same case. So they know very well about the demand. But how I feel about it is that it looks to me that they're deliberately restricting the supply to kind of lengthen the market long enough for them to release the X107, and I know that's how I see it at the moment. They don't produce enough cameras just artificially to do that. Obviously it's not a cheap camera.
I cannot think of one company in the world that is operated for the benefit of its customers. They'll all operate for the benefit of the shareholders. I think Fujifilm,
of course,
if you're right, and this is part of a marketing strategy, well, for us it's horrible, but it's also, as a marketing strategy, it's quite clever and quite bold.
It is,
and it's working. So
it is.
It has driven up the price of used Fujifilm cameras. For weeks and weeks and weeks, I couldn't buy a Pen F because it's like a kind of spillover. People who couldn't get an X100V or V1 thought, oh, what can I get? Oh, I'll get a Pen F, nearest thing. So they bought them all. So I had to get our friend Stan to send me one of his. but this is the effect. Fujifilm has very effectively created this kind of explosion in demand for a camera which, please don't shoot me down, is somewhat ordinary and not cheap. So it's a very nice piece of design, but technically it's fairly ordinary. But the marketing has just been spectacularly successful. So I would say that Fujifilm seems to have its finger on the pulse of consumer demand in a way that other camera manufacturers don't. So, well done, Fujifilm. I
Well done.
guess.
Well done indeed. You know, and to be quite honest, I've been here long enough now, and Rod's probably in the same boat. And to see how different camera manufacturers market their products, and Fujifilm is definitely, it's definitely one of the best companies out there in terms of how they work with the customers' a desire, so to speak. And I think they've done a great job.
It's not all smoke and mirrors though, because Mark Hassler has made the point people enjoy the old school exposure triangle, tactile fill and so on. It's perfectly true. I mean, I don't want to keep boring people with this camera. Is that the right way up?
Yeah.
But on the XT1, I can see what the ISO is and the aperture and the shutter speed. I haven't even had to turn it on.
No.
It is so useful to be able to do this stuff with dials instead of having to press a button, look at the screen, turn a command dial. So what Fujifilm has done isn't all style and no substance. There's quite a lot of substance too.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly, I think, what Mark Hassler had actually said. I'm not sure if it's the retro style Fujifilm people are into. I think that the old school photography exposure triangle, please enjoyed. I feel a bit more. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's. Depending on how hands-on you are, I mean, I'm a very hands-on photographer myself as well. You know, I often have to change exposure triangle to suit different scenarios when I'm shooting outdoor, and having something that is that you can easily see without having to look through the viewfinder or the back screen is good. It's good. You know, like all I need to do is just look down and exactly see it, what all my settings are, the ISO, the shutter speed, the aperture is all there. And that's great, you know. But then again, it really depending on how you shoot as well. Like some photographer, for instance, I know that they basically the camera is glued to the eye. So like, you know, whenever they're out, they just basically keep on holding the camera, so they see everything through the VVF anyway at any one time. So they don't necessarily need to look at the exposure triangle through the top.
I think it depends what you're shooting, doesn't it? I think that's not a good look for travel and street photography, because it's very intimidating for other people. And I would have thought, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, Jimmy, in social event photography, you're constantly engaging with the people you're photographing, and you can't do that with the camera stuck to your face.
No.
But it is very useful to be able to have the settings ready before you even put the camera to your eye.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's just, depending on scenarios, but social events and things. And I often have to engage with the people there. So yes, it makes more sense to be able to see the settings just by have a glance, you know, rather than having to look through it. That's for sure. Let's continue people's comment from here. Let's see. Angelo, Fujifilm is doing what a small sensor camera like APS-C and Micro Four Thirds should do: simply outspec the camera against the FF full frame in the same price range, something that Micro Four Thirds is not doing. Right, okay, that's an interesting one. How do you feel about it, Rod?
I think it's very difficult. It's there are lots of factors at play. Sensor size does make a difference to overall image quality. I was worried about the 40 megapixel sensor in the latest Fujifilm cameras, and it has really shown up serious weaknesses in some of the zooms. On the other hand, with the right lenses, it has a really, really nice look. It's as good as a full frame 40 megapixel camera, in my opinion. You probably wouldn't push the ISO as high, but I think with this sensor and the right lenses, it's making a much better case for APS-C than ever before.
Yeah.
I think outspecking full frame cameras, I'm not sure to what extent that is true, because these new Fujifilms are fairly expensive. So the XT50 is about £1,300 in the UK. The XT5 is about £1,500. You could get a Nikon Z5 or an EOS R8. There's a good camera for the money. Sony, I don't know what Sony I'd suggest at that price, but sailing quite close to the wind for specs.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I think for video as well, it's hard. I don't think Fujifilm's AF, even with the latest cameras, is quite on the same level as Canon and Sony. So I think Fujifilm has to keep making the camera a little bit more affordable, a little bit smaller, and with a dose of style that the others don't have. They can't stop doing that, I don't think.
No, and I think that just to add on that, I think Fujifilm should concentrate on the lenses more. That's how I think, and they certainly need to upgrade the zoom lenses, like you said there, and to make sure that they have lenses to match their system. And that's you know, that's I think to me that's the most important thing, right? You know, you get into a brand,
it is.
You know, you get to your brand, but you can't get any nice lenses, and what are you going to do? You know, if you got a nice camera, but you don't have any lenses to go with it, and that will be my like a sore thumb for me. You know, if I get into any brand, the first thing I need to make sure that it has all the lenses that I need and want for that system, and otherwise I wouldn't even bother looking at it at all.
I think the primes I trust. The zooms only trust the Pro red badge ones, and they're massive.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole huge chunk of market there. People need good, dependable, decent quality consumer zooms, and I think that's where the big hole is at the moment.
Yeah, and just also to add on the comments or reply to what Angela was saying about outspecking the full frame cameras, and I need to just trying to make a statement right here about specking cameras. I think a lot of people have a lot of demands when it comes to resolutions of the cameras, and also perhaps maybe even ISO performances at the extreme range. But we have to be realistic right here. What do we need first? Because when you say outspec, I think that for the same price, a Micro Four, let's say £1,500 a Micro Four Thirds camera compared to a £1,500 full frame camera. Let's put it as an argument there. You will often find that the £1,500 full frame cameras are basically the lowest range of full frame camera you can get around that sort of price. While the £1,500 Micro Four Thirds camera, you are getting enthusiast or even basically pro spec cameras. So there are a lot of differences right there, even though that it may not have the same dynamic range, may not have the same ISO performance, may not have the same resolutions, but spec wise is already kind of outperform anything else that the camera can provide you. Speed, buffer, build, weather sealing, and all the other things. You know, the actual material that they use in their shutter life itself, everything come together. You'll find often that if you just study on excluding the sensor itself, is way higher than anything you would get for the same price in the full frame cameras. And it's really hard. It's really hard to say it's like that. Yeah,
it's how the different formats work. If you with the bigger formats, you get a bigger sensor, but you don't get the same specifications at that price. So you've got to kind of you've got to kind of figure out what your budget is and choose the right camera, and then not get too far into the whole sensor side thing. I still think it comes down to get the camera system with the lenses that you need.
Yeah. For instance, if you're into wildlife and you're really intending to learn a little bit about wildlife, you're using long tele lenses, you know you're going to need a lot of burst shootings, like fast shootings, and also like 600mm lens, for instance, equivalent full frame format. If you just look at that, and any of the £1,500 full frame camera won't give you the speed you need. You know, very often they use a slightly older sensor, very shallow a buffer size. You're not going to get a lot of shots in it, and so if you're intending to do that, you're better off using APS-C or Micro Four Thirds cameras, because for the price you're going to get a much faster cameras to shoot with, and also the lenses will be comparatively cheaper as well.
Well, this is the thing, I think, particularly with wildlife and sports photography. If you go full frame, you can get affordable full frame telephotos, but good full frame telephotos are very, very, very expensive. So if you go to APS-C, you won't necessarily be able to get telephotos of the same quality. But if you go to MOT, there's a couple there which are the quality that you need if you're going to be serious about it,
Yeah.
And they don't cost anything like their full frame equivalent. So I think we're kind of getting off we're getting off Fujifilm a bit here. I don't think Fujifilm is terribly well represented for super telephotos. There's a couple, but I'm not aware that it has any great reputation for birding, for example,
Yeah.
or for long range wildlife photography. But I still think what it comes down to is, don't look at it as a battle between the sensor formats and sizes. Look at it as an exercise in getting the lenses that you need at a price that you can afford, of the right kind of quality, and that will tell you what format you need to be in, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's just looking at another comment right here, and Andrew. Okay, so GG Wildlife. I love my X10, XT2, XT5, all three. I mean, then you have the XT5. I think it's a great camera. I use the XT5 myself, and I think the 40 was it 40 megapixel sensor?
Yep.
It's brilliant. You know, I do like the look of it, like you said, and with the right lenses, of course, and it's definitely something. But I also find the XT5 a little bit slow to focus for some reason. Is it just me, or?
It's not the quickest. I think what also caught me out at the first was that first half pressure on the shutter release.
Yeah,
is quite heavy.
Yes.
So you have to adapt to doing autofocus half press with a bit more force than usual. Because for a while I thought my XT5 was broken until my little pinky got used to the pressure it needs.
Yeah.
So there's that.
It's the muscle memory, right?
It's the muscle memory. And also, not all of those Fujinon lenses are equally fast. The good ones have linear motors, they're quick. But some of the older ones aren't as quick. So there is some variation there as well, which is another reason. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Be right back. Sorry.
That's okay. No problem. And we have another one here, and it's a very strange name you have there. GZN3 GZ QQQ. Do you think Fuji will reduce the different sensors it uses now? 26 BSI, 26 non-BSI, and 40 non-BSI. I don't think so. Simply because you will find a lot of the camera manufacturers do exactly the same thing. They recycle sensors. That even happens to smaller format like MFT. OM System also use older sensors for the lower range cameras as well.
My office closer to the front door.
So I doubt it. The camera manufacturers will rationalize into just one sensor for all the models. It's all cost as well, because obviously the flagship are always going to get the latest and the greatest when it comes to sensor developments. So yeah, I don't think they're going to basically rationalize into one or maybe two sensors. They're going to always have different sensors, different range, and different tier of their system.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I said, even OM System and the EM10 Mark IV, for instance, it has a 20 megapixel sensor, but it's a much older 20 megapixel sensor compared to the even the EM1 Mark III, which is very the last before BSI stack sensors happened in the OM1 series. So yeah, it always going to be like that, unfortunately, and that it is what it is.
I think so, and I think Fujifilm's got quite a small range of sensors compared to some, but I think they do need this, like other manufacturers, to kind of stratify the system.
Yep.
So that they've got a cheap product to get people in, but they can kind of scale it up according to how much people are prepared to spend on the features they want. So I think having two 26 megapixel sensors and a 40, that's quite rationalized already. It's much more so than somebody like Canon, for example, who they've traditionally used a lot of very old sensors in their cheapest products. Nikon, not so much. I'm trying to think who else. Sony, not so much. But
they just sell old cameras continuously. That's all.
Well, yeah. Have we got Sony on our brand schedule, Jimmy.
Of course. We got to talk
Of
about
course.
we got to talk about Sony. How can we not talk about Sony? Right. Okay.
Indeed.
Before we move too much about that, let's talk about Tommy then. Tommy said, with people looking for photography nostalgia of the X106 should be looking at the OM5. I recently picked up a silver EM5 III, and it reminds me very much of the old Canon AE1 that I started out in the 80s. You know what? I actually do agree. OM System / Olympus made some of the best looking retro style cameras in the digital time. And, like Fujifilm isn't the first one. And if you look back at how the whole mirrorless came about, remember the pen, the first pen, digital pen when it first came out, the EP1. That camera is gorgeous. It's a retro looking, pen looking camera. It has the aesthetic just like an old pen half frame film camera. So they had all that ingredients to make the brand work. But unfortunately, I don't think OM was too much into, even though they make retro looking cameras, but when actually working with the retro marketing, unfortunately. And I wish that they do that, and they would be the Fujifilm there now.
I can't quite.
Oh, sorry, Rob, we lost you there a little bit.
That one go, to be honest, because while can you hear me now?
It's a little bit of delay. I think there's a buffering issues there.
Hang on.
Right, we're just waiting for Rod to come back. I think he just needs to reconnect. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting comment there about your quest about OM5 or EM5 series cameras. They are good looking, tiny, compact retro cameras.
I can't quite let that go though, because I agree that those Olympus cameras have the look and feel of a retro camera, but I think the key point about the X100 series and Fujifilm cameras is it's not just the look, it's the controls, because you have the shutter speed, ISO, aperture, which you don't get on any other brand. And I think that whether or not a camera looks and feels retro is a different argument. What I think makes these Fujifilm cameras different is that they actually have old school controls to go with it. So it's not just the look.
That is true, but then if you're looking at, I'm just speaking out loud at the moment. There's no proof to what I'm saying. When EP1 came out, the pen EP1 came out, that's about 12, 13 years ago. They could have evolved that design into more physical control. They could have done, and they could have made the cameras definitely more in line with what Fujifilm has done. They have all the tools, they have all the resources at that time to do that. In fact, they had a cult following, of all these pen cameras, and also the EM5 series, because is how good looking they are, and also capable. These are very capable cameras as well. It just, I think, is I guess it's the direction of the direction of the company may have taken a slightly detour, and that kind of have ignored what they have started.
Would that have meant they needed lenses with aperture rings?
I think so, and but never say never.
I'm saying that would be a great thing to do, but after making no lenses with aperture rings all this time, that's a big ask, isn't it?
Funny enough, now I started reviewing a lot of the Chinese lenses now, and you actually find a lot of these Chinese cameras, Chinese lens makers are introducing aperture rings for other brands.
For sure.
So even though that you may not get the aperture rings in Sony, Nikon, or anything like that, but if you don't mind Chinese lenses and these third-party lenses, they are actually having these physical control back. So well done for this. And I really want to see more of these lenses coming out, especially making them available and also at much lower prices as well. So that all of us can have a little bit of a nostalgia if you really want that. Physical controls that you really want to.
I think I do personally like aperture rings. I don't think they make a whole lot of sense on a zoom, because very often you don't have the choice of apertures anyway for it to make any sense. But I do like it on a prime lens, but you can't always have everything. So after
Yeah.
I've been raving about these Fujifilm primes, what they don't have is a distance scale or depth of field markings, which are
Yep.
two of the most useful things a prime lens can have, and they don't have them. And I'm guessing it's because all the focusing is done electronically by motors, and it's not just like a helical gear inside the lens.
Yeah,
So it's really not possible to do that. But they're still only like 2/3 of the way there, as far as I'm concerned. So Olympus lenses, the little primes, they do have a focus distance scale and depth of field markings, but they don't have an aperture ring. When will I have everything I want? I don't know.
I know. Never a perfect thing, right? Never. Andrew just say that Sony sells old camera prices for under €1,800.
Yeah, I bought my Sony A7 II for £600 on Black Friday in the UK.
That is good. That is really good.
I wasn't going to buy one, but I saw I can't let that go.
Right, and I find that Tommy's quite funny here, and I like to know how many X106 owner just leave the setting on A.
all of them.
Well,
I don't know.
I don't know any of you actually heard me earlier. I said a lot of these people who own the X106 actually just carry them instead of actually shooting with them. So many of them actually have it on off, not even on the camera.
Oh, Jimmy, you're so mean. You're so mean.
No, I'm not mean. What? Look, they bought the they bought the camera for from a Fujifilm's point of view. That's good. Whether they use it or not is another thing.
Yeah, I think the X100V is fairly complex camera for novices. So I think anyone who's bought it as their first proper camera because they like the look of it, they're going to stay in automatic because there's a lot to learn, as there is with any camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew Banner actually said, Rod, you need to use manual lenses with adapter.
For what? Sorry.
I think aperture rings. We're talking about like physical control.
Sure,
Yes.
But if I want autofocus as well? What if I want autofocus?
I like manual focus. I don't have problem with manual focus. I quite like them actually.
But maybe not all the time. There are times when you kind of like to switch back. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mix and match of stuff sometime. Anyway, okay. I think we have spent long enough talking about Fujifilm, and maybe make a couple of final statements about Fujifilm and how do you see them? How do you see them in the next 5 years? And in terms of camera developments, maybe even lenses. I'm not entirely sure. Like now they have these high resolution APS-C cameras now, the XT5, the 40 megapixel, which is, I think, to most people is more than enough. I don't think they need more for the foreseeable future. What else can they do? Are they going to continue to conquer the space for creators by making them more advanced, more hybrid in terms of like maybe making them a bit more video centric, have a little bit more video features, just like Sony? I don't know. And what do you think?
I think Fujifilm needs to have an autofocus system that has the same reputation as Sony's.
Right.
That's going to make a big difference, because as soon as all the YouTubers start saying this is as good as Sony's AF, they'll start to sell more. It's the cameras available now, I think, are good enough to last the next 5 years, in my opinion. The issue with video is processing power, memory cards, and sensors. So memory cards are going to be an issue, because unless Fujifilm decides to just bite the bullet and swap to CF Express, that's always going to put a cap on the video resolution and frame rate and quality you can capture. But the other issue is a 40 megapixel sensor is not good for video. The 26 megapixel sensors are probably the best, because their native resolution is probably 6K, and then you can oversample 6K down to 4K. You can't oversample a 40 megapixel sensor. You have to crop as well, and it's all very messy. So I think for video, everyone's a bit stuck. I think a stacked stacked 24 megapixel sensor is going to be the best sensor for video for some time to come.
Yeah,
for those reasons.
That could be interesting because you know, for the X-T5, as capable as the X-T5, regardless whether it has lenses to match or not, it's not a particularly fast camera to shoot. And you know, buffer rate and also continuous. It's very limiting.
No, it's not sports camera.
Do you think they're gonna bring out, like you said, maybe a stacked sensor, but be faster reader, lower the resolution?
Well, there is,
and make it more. You know, because you said they haven't got anything kind of for wildlife. You know, they need something kind of have that pace to do something like that.
Well,
do you think they might introduce something like that?
The XH2S is that camera, but until the autofocus catches up with Sony and Canon, or everyone agrees that it has, and until Fujifilm has long telephotos of the right kind of quality and price, I think it's going to be difficult in that particular market, sports and wildlife.
And Andrew Banner just say, I would imagine that SSDs would be a logical next step, jumping CF Express. This is external recording.
But we're going to have them dangling off the side.
Yeah, and also that I think that, yes, in a way, if you're purely looking at filming purposes, but you have to also thinking about the usage of it as well. And I know a lot of cameras now allowing you to use external SSD to be connected via the USB-C for recording.
Yeah.
But like you said, not only just dangling, but also considering the weather seal system as a whole, anything exposed is not going to be protected. So having an internal system like the new Jigs 7, for instance, all weather seal, so that you can actually recording ProRes RAW internally on the CF Express. So that is something that potentially will be beneficial for certain professionals who may be exposed to certain elements or difficult, challenging environments. So external SSD recording may not be an option at all.
I think that's okay if you're already going to rig the camera up and you've already got a mic added on and you've got an external monitor. Lots of people do shoot video that way, so adding an SSD isn't an issue unless you prefer a style of shooting where the camera is self-contained. If you use a rig, it's not a problem. If you need your camera to be self-contained and mobile, I think it is a problem. I mean, you can get clamps and adapters where you're going to kind of semi-rigidly attach an SSD to the exterior of a camera. But it's not well, a bit better than that. But I think unless you're getting a cage with some mounting points and prepared for the bulk and the cabling and the complexity of a proper rig, I think SSDs are that territory. They're not. Yeah. And for Angela to say video guys all rig their cameras. A certain type of video guy does, not all. Yeah. Not all. A lot of video shooters do not rig their cameras. So
it's all depending on scenarios, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And I mean, I work with video clients and everything, and there are cases that I will rig my camera bigger, but there are also a lot of cases when I don't rig them at all because confined spaces, things that I need to mount on the gimbal, for instance, and I simply can't rig them because if it's on the gimbal, there's so much you can do with it on the gimbal, and also in some cases when I have to do run and gun, I have to follow something fast, and again, those scenarios are when the camera just simply has to be as small and compact as possible. So I just can't do that either. Even the monitor, sometimes I don't even rig the monitor on top of it. I just use the back screen just because I want it to be very, very tiny.
And you get to the location, how long have you got to set up? If you literally got to turn up with your bag and get a camera out, you haven't got time for that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. I think this is kind of our conversation with Fujifilm cameras, and hopefully that concludes everything we would like to talk about. And we had some fun, certainly. I'm pretty sure some of you did as well. I can see a lot of engagement here today, which is kind of fun. So next week is going to be another interesting topic, another interesting brand. We're going to be talking about my brand, the OM system, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will have a lot to say about OM system as well. well. So remember to join us next week and to talk a little bit about the whole Micro Four Third, not just on Micro Four Third, but obviously because that includes Panasonic as well, but more specifically OM system and / Olympus cameras, how they did in the past, presently OM system, and also looking into the future as well. So a similar format like today in the Fujifilm. We're going to talk a little bit about everything. We're going to ask your opinion about how you feel about OM system, how the equipment, the usage, your experience with the camera system as a whole. So it's a lot to talk about. And like I mentioned earlier as well, don't forget that this is going to be a series of chats that we're going to have. Today is Fujifilm, next week is going to be OM system, and then we're going to have all other brands going to be following as well. So we're going to talk about Panasonic, Nikon, Sony, Canon, all brands, including Leica and Ricoh, and something that you may or may not have of, hopefully. And we shall see. We shall see. So hopefully that will be fine. And if you guys like this sort of thing, remember to give us a thumb, and also subscribe to our podcast playlist, which is already happening. You can replay them in video form and also audio form via YouTube app. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Rod, once again for your expert knowledge on the Fujifilm cameras. and we shall definitely see you again next week. So until next time, I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.